Through the magic of the internet, it is possible for me to respond to some things that were said by a Canadian psychologist by the name of Jordan Peterson.
Indeed, the internet is great. So why is Professor Richard Wolff responding to Jordan Peterson? Well, this goes back to an appearance Peterson made on the Joe Rogan podcast where he mentioned that Marxists refused to debate him.
Ever debated a Marxist supporter? Have you ever debated someone who is pro-equality of outcome?
No, they don't debate me. No, I haven't, because people don't do it. They don't ask me to do it.
What Peterson fails to mention here is that at the time of this interview, his publicist was in the process of booking him a spot on the Zero Books podcast hosted by Marxist commentator Douglas Lane. Now, his appearance on Zero Books was later cancelled due to a scheduling conflict, but after seeing this interview, Lane began pressing him even further. So why are Marxists so eager to debate Jordan Peterson? Well, Peterson has risen to fame while making statements about Marxism that are at best inaccurate and often outright slanderous.
Seen what it can contribute. I don't know how many bloody times we have to run the experiment. No, that wasn't real Marxism. I know what that means. I know what that sentence means. What that means is, well, if I was the dictator, with my profound understanding of Marx's real intent and my universal benevolent compassion, uncontaminated by any proclivity towards darkness or sin, I would bring on the socialist utopia. That's what it means, fundamentally. And if someone says that and claims it, then you should get the hell away from them as fast as you possibly can.
At some point, this must have caught the attention of lifelong economist, professor, and historian Richard Wolff. Wolff, who has been teaching Marxism since the early 70s, decided to release a short video in response to Peterson.
I'm not going to be talking about the psychology he teaches or that he preaches, because that's not my area of expertise, just as it's clear that Marxism is not his. However, he has made statements about Marxism, despite not knowing very much about it, as is evident from what he says. These have included daring Marxists to debate with him, just for the record, anytime, anywhere, as long as we can work out the details, no problem at this end.
Well, there you go. Well-known Marxist professor with credentials from both Harvard and Yale, willing to debate. It is yet to be seen if Peterson will accept his invitation, but the Think Club isn't waiting around to find out.
Hey everybody, I'm Adam, and this is Think Club. A number of people have sent me this video and asked me to comment on it. This is Richard Wolff. He is a Marxist professor. He is challenging Jordan Peterson to a debate. He made a short video, and I am going to comment on it. I have a few clips, and I'm going to provide my analysis.
Go Adam. Alright, look. His video is 16 minutes long, and I'm not going to address all the straw men.
Now, Dr. Wolff goes on to dismiss the tragedies of the 20th century.
Misconceptions.
Marx's famous saying, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, in practice turns out to be something like, contribute as little as possible and take as much as you can carry.
And the outright pseudoscience.
It's because you rode the wave of the Pareto distribution, and it threw you way the hell up into the stratosphere.
Addressing all of this would call for a much longer video than I am prepared to make. Plus, many of these ideas I will be covering in future videos. But what I would like to respond to now is a claim that he makes towards the end.
We don't know how to deal with it, but lucky for us, Professor Wolff has a plan. He has a plan to deal with this problem.
What's the alternative? I already told you at the beginning of this little monologue. That's when the people who produce the surplus, the workers, are themselves the people who get the surplus. How would that work? Workers become their own board of directors. Workers become their own capitalists. Or to say the same thing another way, the worker-capitalist division dissolves.
So out of respect for Professor Wolff, I feel compelled to admit that this is an older clip, and he may have a new idea now on how Marxism is going to save us from the ravages of capitalism. I think it's fascinating how there are a number of shows on stations like CNBC where we see that over and over again, how decision-making in business is really the most important part of business. Making the wrong decisions can destroy your business. But Professor Wolff has faith that the democratic process will yield good results, will yield the most positive business results.
Well, it's too bad he wasn't compelled to do some basic research. As I explained in my video, Understanding Capitalism, these type of democratically run businesses exist today and are known as worker cooperatives. There are over 300 of them in the US alone and have actually shown to have advantages over traditional capitalist ones. So let's do something I was going to do in my Understanding Capitalism video, but I got lazy. This is what I like to call the company on the river example. Let's say there are two companies in the same industry across the river from one another. Company A is structured like your typical capitalist enterprise, owned and operated by the board of directors and upper management. Company B, on the other side, is owned and operated by the employees. Now, in the absence of government regulations, it is discovered that costs can be saved by dumping some of their toxic waste into the river. So what are the chances these companies will do it? Consider that since Company B is run by the employees who also live in the community, they are thus accountable to that community. Remember Bob from Understanding Capitalism? Hi Bob. He also works in his factory and likes to take his kids fishing in that river. I think you see where I'm going with this. Company B has a vested interest in not dumping the waste into the river. But Company A, on the other hand, isn't accountable to the community at all. Their only obligation is to the shareholders, who they are required by law to make a profit for, even if they live on the other side of the world. I think it's a reasonable assumption in this case that the waste goes into the river. So what I am showing with this example is that democratically run companies can and do act in a more socially responsible manner. However, there is something else Adam says that I actually agree with.
Now, these businesses will be competing against other businesses that do it the old-fashioned way, where they get the smartest guy to make the decisions. And I would argue that those businesses with this cooperative framework will probably be driven out of business relatively quickly by these other businesses.
As I mentioned before, worker cooperatives do have advantages over typical capitalist enterprises. For example, they've been better able to survive recessions and have been shown to be more productive. But in the grand scheme of things, I'd say that he is actually right. They would ultimately be outcompeted by the capitalist. But the reason for this is much less worthy of writing home about. Let's go back to our company on the river example. You see, what is happening here is Company B is taking on the extra cost of disposing of the waste, while Company A is reducing its costs by dumping them into the river. So this ultimately gives Company A a financial advantage over Company B, who is now paying a penalty for making this socially responsible decision. Thus, this way of production selects for antisocial behavior. If some businesses decide, out of the kindness of their hearts, that they want to be more socially responsible, they will be outcompeted by those who don't, because they save on cost. But Company A isn't saving on cost at all. They are just shifting them elsewhere, in this case, the community, who now have to deal with this mess. You don't have to be a radical Marxist to understand this. These additional costs to the community are known as externalities and can be found in any introductory level textbook. So the success of a business doesn't necessarily translate into the success of the communities they are in. That's kind of the whole point of Marxism in a way. The capitalist mode of production is ultimately at odds with the wants and needs of human society. So if the solution suggested by Dr. Wolff isn't the final answer, then what is? Well, this brings me to the next point that I would like to respond to.
Modern economies are predicated on the idea of property rights. In a modern economy without property protection, there's really no incentive to achieve anything, since anything you achieve or create or build can be taken away from you without recourse. Property rights in particular are an essential part of any modern economy, and Marxism seeks to abolish property rights.
Propriété, mais laquelle? La propriété privée, bourgeoise.
Je connais cet homme, c'est Karl Marx.
Je parle de la propriété en général, qu'on donne comme un droit naturel tel que la liberté, l'égalité, la sécurité.
Mais ce sont des abstractions, non?
Ce sont des droits.
You can't just make blanket statements about private property without explaining what you mean. And for that matter, what we mean. Marxists don't want to end private property, but are rather in favor of a different conception of property. This shouldn't be a scary thing to discuss. Slavery was a conception of property, feudalism was another conception of property, and capitalism has its own conception of property. Even copyrights and patents have their own conception of property, known as intellectual property. And the invention of the internet forced us to redefine property even further. In other words, property is based on legal definitions, not natural ones. So while building worker cooperatives may have its benefits and is a great step in the right direction, what we ultimately need is a conception of property that allows for this type of democratic production to flourish. Of course, there are many elements to this, and I am hardly an expert. But it probably wouldn't allow for someone to profit from a business dumping chemicals into a river thousands of miles from where they live, while the people that live in that community have no say in the matter. Or let's say, allowing 8 people to own as much wealth as the bottom half of the planet. But rather, it would be something where the success of a business would also translate into the success of the communities they are a part of. So your toothbrush, your car, your yard, and your house would all be fine. And finally, I'd like to close out this video by responding to one last thing it says at the end.
Do you think Jordan Peterson should debate Professor Wolff? Will Jordan Peterson mop the floor with Professor Wolff?
Let me answer it like this. Let's go to the comment section of this video. Here he says, TCRI pointed out, I'm not sure who that is, Richard Wolff makes $8,200 a month on Patreon. Holy cow! Update. I don't care that he makes money. I'm just surprised that he makes so much. That means people actually pay to hear this nonsense. Alright, first of all, Richard Wolff doesn't make $8,200 a month on Patreon. Democracy at Work does. This is an organization responsible for putting on several different podcasts, organizing literature, and many other things. But even if this were true, congratulations, you've discovered that a college professor makes money. What this has to do with Marxism? Well, nothing. And given that he thinks this is such a slam dunk on Professor Wolff, that he pinned this comment to the top. This is a reflection of how little Jordan Peterson, and thus his followers, know about Marxism. So yes, I think they should debate. In fact, I think Jordan Peterson owes it to his followers. If you're going to make your opposition to Marxism part of your brand, then you have an obligation to make sure your listeners understand it, which is clear Jordan Peterson has not done. The marketplace of ideas is indeed important, as Peterson often alludes to, and by refusing to debate Marxists, he is doing a major disservice. So having this debate would be a positive development for everyone involved.
It's something like, well, when one good thing happens to you, it makes you a little more powerful and attractive. And so that fractionally increases the possibility that another good thing will happen to you. And then that spirals out of control, and you get people who have, well, they have all the money. And it's not because there's something oppressive about you. It's because you rode the wave of the Pareto distribution, and it threw you way the hell up into the stratosphere. And we don't know what to do about that.